give us an introduction to the linguistic theory.
Well, thank you very much. Well, so, as you have seen in John Brendan's talks 2 days ago, John Brendan was talking about representations of finite reductive groups in their natural characteristic, in characteristic P. The point in my talk is that I want to talk about representations of finite reductive groups in characteristic 0 and in transverse characteristic, I mean in characteristic L, where L is a prime different from the defining characteristic of the group. Well, and one of the tools is what is called the linguistic theory. It's a theory that involves many aspects, but I will focus only on some of them. And well, let's start with some general things. Well, when you have a group acting on something, X can be a set, a poset, a vector space, or variety, or maybe anything else, then you can recover many properties of the group from the action. Here, this is a workshop on representation theory, so we are interested in action on vector spaces. But in fact, if you have action on set, then you can get an action on a vector space by taking the permutation module. If you have action on a poset, you can also get the permutation module, but there are some more complicated things to do. For instance, you can take the complex of chains and take its cohomology groups, so it gives you many representations. And if you have variety, there is also a way to define representation. You may, if a group acts on a variety, it acts on any reasonable cohomology theory you can define on this variety. Since I want to talk about variety which are defined in characteristic P, I will need the étale and the LAD cohomology. So that's the point in my talk, is really to talk about this thing. Well, this is the linguistic theory. The linguistic theory is really try to construct varieties for finite reductive groups and to try to understand the representations by looking at the action on the LAD cohomology spaces. Well, so I wanted during this talk to do the theory and to do an example to illustrate everything in the theory. But I realized that in 2 hours it was a little bit hard to do this. And in general, in this kind of situation, people throw the example to the basket, and I've decided to throw the theory. Okay. So it's not because I don't like this theory. Many people here know that I really love this theory. Okay, that's not the point. But the example we will follow is the example of SL2. So here it is. So I will consider SL2 as a group of fixed points under the Frobenius map F, which raises all the entries to the qth power. So there is the group SL2 of F, the algebraic closed field, and SL2 of FQ, which is a finite group. I will use, of course, the Borel subgroup of upper triangular matrices, the torus of diagonal matrices, the unipotent subgroup, and so on. And I will also use the element S here. And I've chosen this example because I think it's simple enough that we can do almost everything in characteristic 0, and there are many interesting things to do with this group, even in modular for modular representations. For instance, there is a geometric proof of Brouwer's abelian defect conjecture in this case. And well, I have also decided to focus on P odd. It's not for simplicity, it's just because it's a little bit more complicated. Well, okay. So what can be done with SL2 without geometry? Well, first of all, we can use, well, the usual theory of characters. For instance, we can induce from the Borel subgroup, so consider that T is isomorphic to the multiplicative group of FQ. I will denote it by mu Q minus 1. And if alpha is a linear character of this guy, we can define an induced module. In fact, in a similar spirit as in Brendan's lectures. The induced module of alpha tilde is a lift. Well, I view alpha as a linear character of T. I lift it to B by the usual thing, and I induce it. Well, if we want to know something about these guys, we can compute the scalar products between R alpha and R beta. It's a very easy exercise. And, well, you know that when you compute potential scalar product between two induced modules, you need the, the BB cosets. So you need the decomposition of G into double class. But this is really like this, with this element S. And if you compute the contribution of each pieces to the formula, you get this. Well, this tells you many things. The first one is that if alpha square is different from 1, R alpha is irreducible. For R1, it's not too hard to see that the trivial module will be a component and there is a second one. And the second one is the Steinberg module. So its reduction mode P is really the Steinberg module, which was defined in John's lectures. And there is a last case. Where alpha 0 is the linear character of order 2, which exists because P is odd. Okay? Well, so it decomposes into two irreducible characters, and in fact they are conjugate under GL2. Okay? Well, so this gives you sum of the character table, but if you compute the sum of the square of the degrees of these characters, you see immediately that you don't get everything. And for getting the others, well, I mean, it has been done 100 years ago by Jordan and Frobenius, but we want to get the others with the linguistic theory, namely with action on variety. So let's see an example of a variety on which SL2 of FQ act. You consider the set of points in A2 which satisfies this equation. Then you can check that, well, SL2 of FQ acts linearly on a two-dimensional vector space. That's easy. But you can check that this equation is stabilized by the action of SL2 of FQ. If you really change x and y by the linear combination involving a matrix of determinant 1, that's important, then you see that the equation is stabilized. Well, also mu q plus 1 acts by scalar multiplication. So I denote this by this the group of q plus 1's root of unity in the algebraic closure of Fp. And why? Because if you multiply x and y by xi, then you multiply this quantity by xi to the 1 plus q. And if you are in this group, that's OK. Also, the Frobenius acts because it is an automorphism of field. And this is an equation which is really defined over the prime field, in fact. And they satisfy the following commuting relations. Well, so the action of G and mu q plus 1 commute. G also commute with the action of F. But the action of F and the action of mu q plus 1, they don't commute. It's just given by this formula. It's a stupid exercise. Well, so we get an action of this guy on the variety Y. Well, and so the main point of this talk will be to compute the L-adic cohomology, at least in characteristic 0 for today, of this variety, and to recover all the missing characters of SL2 inside this variety. Well, so maybe you might be afraid about L-adic or étale cohomology, as I am, but I want to reassure you by listening what Deligne said 30 years ago. So, les exposés 1 à 6 de SGA4 donnent la théorie générale des topologies de Grothendieck. Très détaillées, ils peuvent être précieux lors de l'étude de topologies exotiques, telles celles qui donnent naissance à la topologie cristalline. Pour la topologie étale, si proche de l'intuition classique, un garde-fou si imposant n'est pas nécessaire. Il suffit de connaître, par exemple, le livre de Godement et d'avoir un peu de foi. Let's translate in English, because... Well, so chapters 1-6 of SGR4 develop the general theory of Grothendieck topologies. Very detailed, they may be a valuable tool for studying exotic topologies, such as the one yielding the crystalline topology. for étale topology so close to classical intuition, that's the point, such imposing safety net is not necessary. It is sufficient to know, for instance, Godemann's book, and to have some faith. Well, so I'm asking you to have some faith today, not faith in God, but faith in the people who have developed this theory, Grothendieck, Deligne, and the others. I think they are more reliable. Well, so what does the étale topology do for you for studying representations? Well, so if P is a prime number, and F is, again, my algebraic closure, if V is an algebraic variety over F, if gamma is a group acting on this variety, and if I choose a prime number L different from P, then the theory gives you a family of finite dimensional vector spaces, and this family is functorial enough so that the action of gamma is preserved. They are endowed with an action of gamma. So as with general cohomology group for topological objects, compute the dimension, for instance, of each of these cohomology group can be a very hard problem. And sometimes we are only able to compute a much weaker invariant, namely the Euler characteristic. In this case, we can define the Euler characteristic like this. But I want to keep trace of the action of gamma. So I take this alternating sum, but I keep trace about the action of the group. Okay, so this is an element in the Grothendieck group of the finite dimensional modules. So it can involve negative signs. Okay. Well, and all these cohomology groups are very close to classical intuition because they satisfy many properties of usual cohomology of topological space. There is a QNet formula. There is a bound about the degrees in which they are concentrated. If you have action of finite groups, then you can recover the invariant in the quotient and so on. So we have many tools for computing these cohomology groups, and I want to give you a list of them. So don't worry about the list. Don't look at it. We will use it item by item during this talk. But I just want to mention some of the classical things. First of all, you see that the cohomology is bounded. It's concentrated in degrees 0 to twice the dimension. And if V is an affine variety, it's even better. If you have the top cohomology group, the 2D cohomology group is just a permutation module on the irreducible component of V. We have a QNet formula. There is an exact sequence when you have an open subset and the closed complement, and so on. If gamma is finite, you recover the cohomology, the invariant in the cohomology inside the cohomology of the quotient. I want just to focus on this, on 6, because, well, in characteristic 0, at least the trace of an element on the alternating sum is equal to the dimension of the fixed point under this element. Here, because we are in characteristic P, even though the L-adic topology is close to classical intuition, it is close to classical intuition for P prime things. For the P elements, for P groups, it's really more complicated. Well, so we are going to use only this, and we will compute all the cohomology of this variety. Well, just for, again, reassure you, let's compute the cohomology of P1. Well, P1 is just A1 plus, and you add the point at infinity. So you have an open subset and the point and the closed subset. So we can use the rule 3, and we get an exact sequence. But the cohomology of A1 is given in 8. It is concentrated in degree 2, and it has 0 everywhere else. The same for the point. And here you see immediately that you can compute the cohomology of P1. But P1 is endowed with an action of bold G, SL2 of F. And this is a connected group. And if you look at 7, a connected group acts always trivially on the cohomology. So we get that you get that it is an isomorphism as G modules when I denote by QL bar the trivial G module. Okay? So with these rules, we can compute this example. This is not such a thing, but at least that's the beginning. Well, so I said that I didn't want to talk too much about the general theory, but let me say at least a few words. So for 5 minutes, G will be a general connected reductive rule, not SL2. Okay? And F is a Frobenius endomorphism, and we consider the finite group defined by the fixed point of the Frobenius endomorphism. And, well, a classical example is GLN. It was given also by John in his lectures. And the idea of the linear, well, the finite group is this guy. And the idea of the linear is to consider the Lang map that sends an element G to G minus 1 f of G. This is a morphism of variety because F is a morphism of variety. And this map turns out to be surjective. That's a property not too difficult to prove. And that it satisfies that L of G is equal to L of G prime if and only if G and G prime are connected by an element of the finite group. That's, again, a stupid exercise. Well, and if Z is a subvariety of G, locally closed, for instance, then the finite group GF acts on the left, because of this property here, on the inverse image under the Lang map. So in fact, that's the general varieties that Deligne and Lustig have considered. They have considered this kind of variety, even more special varieties. They didn't take anything for Z. They took very special varieties. And using these varieties, these interesting varieties, they have obtained the parametrization of all the reducible characters in a huge series of papers by Lustig. He has also computed the degrees. He has given an algorithm for values at semi-simple element, and he has done many other things, as you know. Well, but the starting example that inspired Deligne and Lustig, it's written in their original paper, is an example of Drinfeld, this one, which we consider this variety. So we will really focus on this guy and compute everything for this. Well, okay, so now let's go back to release the example. So from now on, G will be SL2 of F. And the group G not bold is the finite group SL2 of FQ. Well, so as we have seen, we have an action of this group on this variety. So if we consider the cohomology group of this variety, then it is endowed with an action of G and an action of mu Q plus 1 which commute. So the cohomology group are endowed also with an action of G and mu Q plus 1, and this action commute. So it makes sense to take some isotypic component for a linear character of mu Q plus 1, and this will be a G module. So that's what we are doing here. If theta is a linear character, we write HIC y of theta, the theta isotypic component, and because the actions commute, this is really a G module. Well, and also we can define, as I have said, in some sense, Euler characteristic. In this case, this will not be such a big deal because the variety is a curve. It has dimension 1, so it has cohomology only in degree 1 and 2. I have added a sign just for convenience. Okay? And we will try to understand all these, well, let's say characters of SL2 of FQ. Well, so this is a particular instance of Deligne-Lustig induction. If you want to study the theory, you will see that this is a particular example. Well, so the R prime theta will play the same role as the R alpha here. And they will satisfy almost the same properties. The easiest R alpha to decompose is R1 because it contains a trivial character and it contains another character which is very important in many theory. And so we will do the same thing for R prime. We first compute R prime 1. What is it? Using the rules on the slide. Well, so what is R prime 1? R prime 1 is the one isotypic component of H1 minus the one isotypic component of H2. but the one isotypic component is just the invariant under mu q plus 1. And if you want to compute the invariant under mu q plus 1 of the cohomology group, you need to compute the quotient of y by mu q plus 1. So let's do it. Well, for this, we consider the following map that goes from y to P1, and that sends xy to, well, the homogeneous, to xy in homogeneous coordinates. It is well defined because x and y can't be both 0. In fact, even one of them can't be 0, okay, because of this equation. So this is well defined. It is G equivariant, that G acts on both sides, and you can check that it's, this map is G equivariant. And moreover, its image is it's not P1, it's not the whole P1, it's P1, but without its rational points. And the reason is the following. Because of this equation here, well, if xy was sent to a rational line, it means that xy and xq, are proportional, or in other words, that xyq minus yxq is equal to 0. That's not the case, okay? But if it is different from 0, if this quantity is different from 0, then by rescaling, you can achieve to get really a point here. So this explains why the image is exactly this. But you can rescale, but you are limited in the way you rescale. You are limited by, you can rescale up to multiplication by a q plus 1 root of unity. Okay, if you multiply x and y by the same scalar, this doesn't change. Okay. Well, so this gives you that pi of xy is equal to pi of x prime prime if and only if they are in the same orbit under the action of mu q plus 1. So we get this commutative diagram here, and the property here tells you that this map is bijective. So this is a bijective map. It can happen in algebraic geometry that a bijective map, bijective morphism between algebraic varieties is not an isomorphism, but this one is an isomorphism. Okay. Well, so we have computed the quotient of y by mu q plus 1. I recall that this was in order to understand the one isotypic component of the cohomology group of y. So let's go back to this. Well, so first of all, so let's obtain first decomposition of h star c of y. So first of all, the cohomology is concentrated in degree 1 and 2 because y is affine. It is a closed subset of A2, and because of property 1/2 and 1. Okay? So we have only two groups to compute. The second group is stupid. The variety is irreducible, and 2 tells you that it is H2 is the permutation module on the irreducible components. So that's the trivial module even for G and T. The rule 5 star tells you that H star C of y, the one isotypic component, is the cohomology of P1. But if we use, again, this, the exact sequence given in 3, then this is just the difference between these two guys. Okay? Well, but this we have already computed. That was the first exercise. And the second one, H star C of a finite set, this is just the permutation module on this finite set. The permutation full module on this finite set is just R1. So this is the identity plus the Steinberg. So we get that this is the identity minus the Steinberg. So that's pretty easy computation using all the rules on the slide. Well, not all, some of the rules on the slide. Well, so that's the first thing we can say. The second thing that we can say, well, first of all, so H star C is concentrated in degree 1 and 2. The degree 2, we know that it is a trivial character, so it tells you that the degree 1, the one isotypic component of the degree 1 cohomology group of y is the Steinberg character. So you see, even if you don't know anything about L-adic cohomology, we have computed at least this thing. Okay. Well, another property is that, well, because f and mu q plus 1 interacts in this way, in fact, it tells you that the theta isotypic component will be exchanged by f to the theta minus 1 isotypic components. So these modules are isomorphic. Well, so this led to a first decomposition of the cohomology. The cohomology of Y, well, I take minus the cohomology of Y. There is the R'1 part, which is minus 1G plus the Steinberg. There is R prime theta 0, where theta 0 square is, theta 0 is as order 2 exactly. This guy is not sent to another guy by F, it is stabilized by F. And the other guys, the one for which theta square is different from 1, they are exchanged by the Frobenius. So these characters are equal. If we go back here, we have obtained that the induced from U to G of 1U is equal to 1G plus the Steinberg character of G plus R alpha 0 plus R alpha 0 minus plus the sum for alpha square different from 1 of R alpha. Okay? And if I want to write it in a funny way, I can say that this is H star C of the variety, the finite variety G mod U. This is the permutation module. Okay? So you see that we have exactly the same kind of decomposition for, in fact, this is also a Deligne-Lustig variety, a finite one, and the decomposition for the variety Y. But there are many things that remain to be proved. First of all, are these guys irreducible or maybe almost irreducible? Okay, in the case, in the split case, it was that. Another thing is that, do we get something new? Because yes, that's nice, we have computed the one isotypic component, but we didn't get anything new. So well, that's a little bit disappointing. The point of this example was to obtain something else. Okay, so well, so these guys, are they non-zero? Are they different from the R alpha and so on? So that's what we are going to do. Well, so the first thing I want to prove is that, well, if they are non-zero, they will be new thing. New thing in the following sense. I want to compute the scalar product between these two things, and I want to prove that it is equal to 0. Okay? But for computing this, I need to understand well, in fact, no, yes. I need to understand what are the fixed points under U and the variety Y. Okay, because of the rule 5. Here I'm just computing the U invariant in R theta. So I need to compute the U invariant in this cohomology group. And the U invariant here are given again by the quotient. So I need also again to compute another quotient, not the quotient by mu q plus 1, but the quotient by U. Okay, so let's do it. Well, so the map that goes from Y to A1 less the point 0 that sends xy to y is mu q plus 1 equivariant. But also what you can check is that the function y is invariant under the action of u. If you change xy by a linear transformation that lies in the group u, that is behind, then you don't change the result. And in fact, it's an easy exercise to show that this map is surjective, and that satisfies the same property as the one before when we were computing the quotient by mu q plus 1. Well, so we get, again, a commutative diagram. It factorizes, and the map is bijective, and it is an isomorphism. Well, okay. So that's what we have obtained. But what is, so we need to compute the cohomology of this guy. But what is the cohomology of this guy? So we have done the example of P1 because it was A1 with one more point. Here this is A1 less 1 point and minus 1 point. So we can still use the long exact sequence. And we get, I don't do it in this case in full detail, but we get that h1c of y mod u is equal to ql bar, h2c of y mod u is equal to ql bar, and other cohomology groups are 0. Okay, so we get some u invariant in degree 1 and some u invariant in degree 2, but not so much, only dimension 1. Well, so that's good because, well, in degree 2, we are sure to find QL bar. We are sure to find only one, well, the space of u invariant must be of dimension 1, that's clear. That's also clear that we get some u invariant from the Steinberg module. That's classical. The restriction of the Steinberg to u is a regular representation. So we get at least one invariant. So it means that we have nothing else. Okay? Because we have found everything in the second cohomology part, and all the u invariants are concentrated in R'1. So in R'1 there is nothing new, but in all the others, if they are non-zero, there will be something new. So if theta is different from 1, I prime theta, the scalar product between these two guys, is equal to 0. Well, so let's prove that they are non-zero. I mean, because if they are 0, that's not very interesting. Well, so let's compute their dimension. In fact, that will be an easy thing to do. And we will use this property, property 6 I have mentioned, namely that the trace of an element is given by the trace of its p part under the fixed point under the prime part. In particular, if there is no p part, the trace of the element is equal to the Euler characteristic of the fixed point part. Okay? So if psi is an element of mu q plus 1 and different from 1, then the trace of psi on this alternating sum is equal to the trace of 1 on the fixed point. But what are the fixed points? Well, if you multiply x and y by a scalar which is different from 1, because they are non-zero, you will get something different. So this guy, yxi, is empty. So we get 0. Well, so the trace of any non-trivial element on this alternating sum is non-zero. So it tells you that this is a classical exercise in character theory. It tells you that it is a multiple of the regular representation of mu k plus 1. Okay? But the regular in the regular multiplication of mu k plus 1, all the linear characters have the same multiplicity, namely the multiplicity 1. So here this tells you that as a mu k plus 1 module, so this is a multiple of the regular representation, a virtual multiple. And this tells you in particular that the theta isotypic component will have the same dimension as the one isotypic component. But we have computed the one isotypic component. Okay, and it has dimension q minus 1. R'1 was minus the identity plus the Steinberg, as it is written here. Well, so good, it is non-zero. Well. So now we want to prove a little bit more. We want to prove that they are irreducible. Okay. We need to prove that the scalar product between r prime theta and r prime theta prime is equal to the same kind of formula as this one, maybe. Okay. This will really give us what we want. Well, so let's see what should be done for getting this. Well, so what I want to compute is this kind of thing. Okay? But in our case, well, because of the property which is here, well, the trace of an element is always in Z. So it tells you that at least without the theta isotypic component, this guy is self-dual. Okay? So with the theta isotypic component, it will exchange theta and theta inverse. So we are going to compute what? C of y tensor star C of y theta prime scalar product with 1G. That's what we are going to compute. Okay? Well, but again, here we have a tensor product of cohomology groups. So it's, well, this is theta and theta prime. So this guy, this is equal to H star C of y cross y. And y cross y is endowed with an action of mu q plus 1 cross mu q plus 1. So I must take the theta prime isotypic component. And if I want to compute the scalar product with 1, I just need to compute the fixed point. So if I write it like this, I need to compute this. But again, the fixed point is given by H star C of y cross y modulo G with the diagonal action. And I must keep track of the action of mu q plus 1 cross mu q plus 1. Okay? So I need to compute this quotient, okay, of the variety y cross y by the diagonal action by G. Okay, so let's do it. Well, I will do it slowly. Well, so this variety, this is just by definition the set of points x, y, zt in A2 that satisfies, x, y satisfies this equation, and zt satisfies this equation. You're right. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Well, and in fact, this variety can be divided into two parts because, well, when you have two elements x, y, and zt, which are in A2 cross A2, there is a quantity which is invariant when you use the diagonal action of an element of determinant 1. This is the determinant between x, y, and zt. And so we can decompose this variety as a zero part and a non-zero part. Here I mean that's xy minus zt is equal to 0. And here I mean that xy minus zt is different from 0. This decomposition, this is an open subset, this is a closed subset, this is a closed equation. This decomposition is compatible with the G action because, as I have said, this is invariant under G. Well, so it tells you that the quotient will also be a union of these two sets. Well, so remember that I want to compute this here. Well, so what about the first part? The first part here tells you that x, y, and zt must be proportional. But they must be proportional and satisfy both the same equation if and only if they are proportional by a scalar which is a q plus 1 minus root, q plus 1's root of unity. So this tells you that the zero part is isomorphic to mu q plus 1 cross y by the map that sends psi xy to, well, x and y and psi x and psi y. Okay? And I need to compute the quotient by g of this. So I need to compute the quotient by g of this, but g does not act here, it acts here through this isomorphism. And so let's compute the quotient by g. We'll do always the same thing. So the map here that goes from y to a1 that sets xy q square minus yx q square is still invariant under g. This is, well, this is not the other Dixon invariant of SSL2, but almost. So it's also mu q plus 1 invariant. And in fact, it's quite tricky to prove that it is surjective and that it satisfies the following property, that the image of two guys are the same if and only if the two guys are in the same g orbit. That's a tricky exercise. Okay. Well, so this gives you again the same diagram, a morphism to A1 that factorizes through the quotient. This is a bijection, and in fact it is an isomorphism. Well, so this tells us that H star C of y cross y 0 mod g. This is, well, y mod g is A1, so it has only cohomology in degree 2. And mu q plus 1 is a finite set. We use the tensor product formula, QNet formula. So we get that it is isomorphic to q L bar of mu q plus 1. And isomorphic as what? As mu q plus 1 q cross times mu q plus 1 module. And the action, well, as mu q plus 1 mu q plus 1 module. I will come back later to the action of this guy. Well, what about this part? This part is much more difficult to handle. So it goes as follows. Well, we must find some maps that are invariant under the action of G in order to compute the quotient by G. So let's consider the following map that goes to A1 minus 0 cross A1 cross A1 that sends x, y, z, t to, well, the first coordinate is x. Well, it's not xy minus zt. I mean, it's xt minus zy. The determinant between the vector xy and zt is xt minus zy. So sorry about this. Xt minus zy. But also I can change zt to the q's power. So I get also an invariant map like this. And in the other direction, I get fqt minus yqz. So let's consider this map. So this quantity is different from 0. That's why I have written this. And if I call u, a, and b these three variables, it's an easy exercise to check that AB, well, plus or minus, that's the exercise to determine the sign, is equal to 1. Okay, using all the relations, if you compute this quantity, only one of them work, I don't know which one. You get 1. Well, so in fact, the image of this map is not the whole of this thing. It will be contained in the subvariety defined by this equation. Moreover, you can check that this map, if I call it lambda, satisfies the following property. Lambda is surjective on, well, let's call it V, which is a set of U, A, B in A1 minus 0 cross A2. That satisfies AB plus or minus U to the Q plus 1 equals 1. And, well, at this point you would say, why did you need to separate the 0 and the non-zero part? Because this is also defined on the 0 part. But the point is that for getting the surjectivity, it's an easy exercise, for getting the surjectivity, you really need that xt minus yz is non-zero. Okay, so that's one of the points. And also it satisfies that lambda of, so that's a quadruple, let's call it, well, x underline, is equal to lambda of y underline, if and only if there exists g in G such that g x equals y. Okay, so it satisfies again the same property. And we can check that y cross y non-zero mod G is isomorphic to our variety V. Well, but we are not done because we have computed this quotient. But now we need to compute the cohomology of this variety. But, well, a weaker form of this cohomology is the Euler characteristic. And now what happens to be true here is that the variety V, well, it's endowed with an action of mu q plus 1 cross mu q plus 1 that you can't follow through all the maps. That's easy. But it is also endowed with an action of a connected torus. So GM acts on this variety simply by the following map. Z, well, I need another letter. Gamma acting on U, A, B is equal to U, gamma A, and gamma inverse B. Okay, this really stabilizes this equation. And it's easy to check that it commutes with the action of mu q plus 1 cross mu q plus 1. So now we can use one of the hardest things here, the property 6 prime, that tells you that if you have a finite group acting on an affine variety, and if S is the torus acting also on this variety, and if the two actions commute, then it doesn't say anything about the individual cohomology group, but it gives you something about the alternating sum, namely the Euler characteristic, the equivariant Euler characteristic, I keep trace of the action of the group, is the same as the equivariant Euler characteristic of the fixed point under S. But what are under the torus? But what are the fixed points under this action? Well, there are almost no fixed point. To be fixed, a point must satisfy that A equals B is equal to 0. For otherwise, there is no chance. Okay? But if A equals B equals 0, then we get that U q plus 1 is equal to 1. So we get again our finite group mu q plus 1. So the fixed point here is just a finite set under this, is just a finite set isomorphic to mu q plus 1. Well, so what did we get? Is again QL bar times mu q plus 1. Again, as a module. Okay. But here, there is a subtle thing. This is not exactly the same action. If you follow through all the isomorphisms, in this case, the action of an element xi prime is just multiplication by xi prime. Okay? Oh no, by xi prime inverse. And in this case, the fraction of an element of psi prime is the multiplication by psi prime. Okay, so that's not the same action. At the end, because, well, the Euler characteristic satisfies this additive property, we get that H star C of y cross y mod G, the theta prime homogeneous component. This is QL bar mu Q plus 1 theta prime isotopic component plus QL bar mu Q plus 1 the theta prime isotopic component. But this, again, this is not the same. So I would like to put a tilde to say that it is not the same structure. And as the dimension of this, well, in this case, this is 1 if theta is equal to theta prime, and 0 otherwise. And in this case, it's 1 if theta is equal to theta prime inverse, and 0 otherwise. That's an easy computation. So we have, at the end, we got that I prime theta prime is equal to theta prime plus theta prime inverse. Okay, so we are done almost. This formula here is again a Mackey formula. This is a Mackey formula not for the usual induction. It's a Mackey formula for Deligne-Lustig induction. If you really want to learn the theory, if you want to see the proof of the Mackey formula in the case of induction from a torus, then the proof goes exactly like this. You compute the product of the two Deligne varieties, its quotient by G. You split this quotient into several pieces, a finite number of pieces, and on each piece you try to find an action of a torus so that it reduces the computation to a simple case. It really goes, SL2 really illustrates the proof of the Mackey formula for Deligne-Lustig induction. It really goes like this. Well, so we are almost done. I mean, we have proved that all these guys are irreducible because of this. These guys split into two irreducible components. So that really looks like what happens above. So this guy is r prime plus theta 0 plus r prime minus theta 0. Well, so did we get everything? Did we get everything? So we have two irreducible characters, one in the Steinberg, which are the unipotent ones. We have the previous R alpha, the one obtained by induction from the Borel subgroup. We have Q minus 3 over 2 such characters because R alpha is exchanged with is equal to R alpha minus 1. Okay. We get again such these characters, but we still don't know the degree of the two components here. Okay. Well, so we know just that the sum is Q minus 1, and that the sum of the square is less than or equal the size of G minus the sum of all the squares, or all the squares of the other characters. And this is equal to this. But now, if you solve these two things, you are lead to the following things, that in fact d plus is equal to d minus is equal to Q minus 1 over 2, and that we have got all the irreducible characters. Okay? So if you had the courage to follow me all along, only using these rules on L-adic cohomology, we were able to compute all the irreducible characters of G to decompose exactly the cohomology of this variety, the Drinfeld variety here, really obtain all the isotopic components, everything. We have computed everything. Well, I wanted to add something. Yes. So what has been illustrated during this, only on this example of SL2? Well, the fact that we have two unipotent characters. If you take the one isotopic component in this case, R1, or the one isotopic character component in the cohomology of Y, we have obtained two unipotent characters. 2 is a finite number, but it's a very finite number. I mean, it does not depend on Q, okay? That's what I mean by finite. The number of characters depend on Q, but the number of unipotent characters does not. And this is a general fact for finite reductive groups, that the number of unipotent characters does not depend on Q. That's a hard fact. I mean, that's a tough work by Lustig. Well, we have also illustrated the Mackey formula for the Deligne-Lustig induction. This is really a fundamental tool in the Deligne-Lustig theory. We have also illustrated that the parametrization of irreducible characters of the group involves the linear characters of finite subtori. We have used the tori T, the split tori, torus, which is isomorphic to the Q minus 1's root of unity. But mu Q plus 1 can be seen inside, where is it? Nowhere, oh, here. It can be seen also inside SL2 of FQ because, well, the multiplicative group FQ square times acts on FQ square, so it can be viewed as a subgroup of GL2 of FQ. And if you consider its intersection with SL2 of FQ, you are led to consider the element of norm 1, namely the Q plus 1's root of unity. Okay, so mu Q plus 1 is really a subgroup of SL2. So that's what I mean by this. We have used only linear characters of subtori of SL2, and this is a general fact that in a connected reductive group you can get everything from this. It's again, it's not so easy. Well, there is a kind of Jordan decomposition going with this. I don't want to go into the details. We have also seen that the degrees are polynomials in Q. The degree of 1 is 1. Here we have Q. Here we have Q plus 1 over 2. R alpha has degree Q plus 1. Here we have obtained Q minus 1, Q minus 1 over 2 for I prime theta 0 plus and minus, and so on. So these are polynomials in Q. That's also a general fact. I didn't define. I didn't want to go into the, to the theory, but I mean, well, see, yes, I can say something. I say that parameterization of characters involves the linear characters of finite subtori. If you look at the characters which are obtained only using the trivial character of the finite subtori, and you look at what you obtain using the Deligne-Lustig induction, then these ones are the unipotent ones. Okay, and there are only finitely many, really finitely many. Okay, well, but so SL2 has illustrated these things. It has also illustrated that the cuspidal characters appear in the cohomology associated to non-split tori. We have obtained the cuspidal characters. Cuspidal means that, well, you cannot find them using, let's say, an algebraic induction, not a geometric induction. So that's this property. But there are some things that have been hidden. Well, of course, the étale cohomology. Okay, I just use my slide and all the properties. It's really a magic box. Another thing that has been hidden is the character values. It's a difficult problem to compute the character values. You can get the parametrization, but obtaining the character values is really a tough work. Well, for SL2, you can do it with this, using the geometry, but I don't want to do it. For other groups, it's really much more complicated. Another thing that is very important in the whole Deligne-Lustig theory is that even though you work with geometric methods, you really need to understand the structure of the Weil groups. Not only the structure, not only the representation theory, but really the structure. It's more complicated than just the representation theory, because you need things that really depends on the group structure, maybe the braid group associated, the centralizer of some regular elements, and so on. So you really need more than the representation theory of the Weil group. You really need the Weil group, not its representation theory. Well, I also want to give some references. Well, maybe the three. See, among all Lustig's papers, I have decided to focus on these three. So the Deligne-Lustig paper is a very beautiful paper, but it's pretty hard. I think that this one is a very good introduction. I mean, that was where I learned the linguistic theory. And if you are really, really very courageous, you can read the Lustig's Orange Book. But that's another, that's pretty tough. Well, so I just want to conclude for today. So today we have done only characteristic 0 thing. We have computed all the irreducible characters. Well, not computed the values, but we have parameterized all the irreducible characters. There is one guy that we didn't use today. Is the Frobenius. We didn't see, except that in the fact that it exchanged r prime theta and r prime theta minus 1. We didn't use very much the Frobenius endomorphism. We will use it tomorrow, not only to do some things in characteristic 0, but also to do modular representation theory. So the main theme of tomorrow will be to do modular representation theory of SL2, still of SL2, obtain some Morita equivalence from the geometric point of view, obtain Brouet-Sabellian defect group conjecture in one particular case. Well, it's a cyclic defect case, but it's by geometric methods. And all of this involve the knowledge of the action of the Frobenius. So this will be the main theme for tomorrow's lecture. Thank you.